Okay, now it'll be time for chapter 3. Previously on Empress Theresa, we had that whole chapter of basically just Theresa being told, like, oh, I'm the best at everything. I could pitch for the Red Sox. I was wonderful, like, just basically everybody praising at her feet just how brilliant and amazing she is, which, I don't know, it almost came across as like a parody of Mary Sue's, which, I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point. And, apparently, Struthers went missing. She talked to this one guy named Jeremy. Yeah, Benton. Benton, that was his name. Um, and he was just like, "Oh, I just couldn't. I just had to be in your presence." And then there was like people like researching how it's a organization called Oops, and apparently we're supposed to be taking that seriously. And I can't help but chuckle every time I say that. Right. She also dealt with internet trolls, which it has come to my attention thanks to a source of mine, thanks to Akai Yoru, or is what he's called on YouTube. He has brought to my attention that that was added actually in because you know how I said I'm reading the 2020 version. Well, apparently that was added in, which is why that whole complaint about internet trolling and whatnot comes out of nowhere. That was, as I kind of suspected, real life subtext to what Norman Boutin was dealing with online. So he just kind of did that as like a little screw you, I guess, to everybody else, which I don't know. I mean, I guess that just adds a little bit of charm. So I just want to give him a shout outs for giving me that information. Anyway, now for chapter 3. The last chapter was really short. It was only like 27 minutes. The one before that was 55, which I spent like a long time just talking about how great Theresa is, which actually the last two chapters were. That's going to be the rest of the book, isn't it? Anyway, whatever. Time for chapter 3. Boston College isn't a small college, and it's not in Boston. It's a large university in Newton, Massachusetts, 6 miles from Boston. The location is as good as it gets. Newton is an upscale neighborhood. Downtown Boston is accessible on the T, which has a terminus right next to campus, and the campus itself is small enough to make walking to any part of it quick. BC has 9,000 undergraduates and a nationality and a nationally known football team. Sorry, I need to turn my phone off. Sorry about that. Sorry. Where was I? And a nationally known football team. But that's not why I went there. I got a full scholarship, plus room and board. It had to be the work of Father Donati. Donati. I can never get this. There's no R in it, so I know it's not Donatry. Donati. Yeah, Father Donati and the Cardinal. With these people fighting for me, I would be stretching my luck going my own way. Besides, I had some responsibilities to my parents who were comfortably well off, but not rich enough for astronomical tuition costs. Father whatever. Father Donati remained in Framingham. Again, probably the work of the Cardinal. Priests are usually moved around more often. He was not too many miles from me, and I might move back to Framingham. Every freshman wants to make a good first impression. The first night on campus, the girls wandered from room to room, socializing with their dormitory mates, as if the first day determined their social life for their next 4 years. I soon found how sheltered I'd been in Framingham compared to the sophisticated kids from New York and other big cities. That night, I realized I was not going to be the spark plug of the college scene. But that was okay. Just as Framingham High hadn't been the final definition of my life, neither would BC. Monday brought the chaos of finding my way around campus, finding the classrooms of my courses, which had been set up before I arrived, and standing in line at the bookstore. The assignments I got in my classes seemed endless. Could anybody do all that work in a semester? After my last Monday class, I relaxed in my room to unwind. Then a group of girls invited me to join them at supper, and we walked to the cafeteria. We got our food and sat down. From long habit, I looked around the room. There was a group of kids at a nearby table looking at me. A girl learns to read expressions. One boy was intently looking at me. I called him Mr. Intense. He was very handsome, with short hair as black as my own, and he was around 6 feet, which was a good match for my 5 feet 4 inches. Okay, well, we have our official height now. I liked taller guys, and apparently he liked smaller girls. He wasn't gawking at a pretty girl or lusting for her body. He looked interested, and that's okay. A girl gets used to being looked at. Yeah, my mom said that she could tell this was written by a man, by the way, but oh well. By the way, if you're going to spell OK as O and K, it should be all caps, and if it's not in all caps, then it should be with a O-K-A-Y, but why am I bothering with that? But it wasn't Mr. Intense who made the first move. A boy next to him, Mr. Fast Move, brought his food tray over to my table. "Hi," said Mr. Fast Move. "Can I sit here?" "Sure," I said with a smile. I had been advised to be friendly from day one, or be labeled a tease for the rest of our 4 years. "I'm Jack Coaster," said Mr. Fast Move. "Aren't you Theresa Sullivan, the baseball player?" I had been on television a lot. "I am," I said. And we were off and running. I noticed that Mr. Intense looked disappointed. It made me think of someone whose neighbor won the lottery. Yes, she's getting boys jealous of her. That night, I looked up both Jack Coaster and Mr. Intense on the computer. BC provided free disk space, and all the students were urged to set up a web page about themselves before they got to school. The kids' dormitories were listed, which made it easy to find people if you didn't know their names. It turned out that not only did Jack and Mr. Intense both live in my dormitory, they were 2 doors away from each other. So if Jack and I were an item, Mr. Intense was unlikely to interfere. I read the computer screen. Jack was a boy from close to New York City, but not in it. His father was owner of a specialty food store. Jack was going to be a history major, a guarantee of a job in his father's store. Mr. Intense was Steve Hartley. His father was a physicist for Intel, and Steve was majoring in physics too. Okay, well that's kind of a spoiler, because you know that, remember like way back in the first chapter when it said that her full name becomes Theresa Elizabeth Sullivan Hartley? Yeah, I wonder who she gets together with by the end of this, because now they have like a little love triangle. Like, that's great. Anyway, his father was a physicist for Intel, and Steve was majoring in physics too. That was interesting. He mentioned he was Catholic. Also interesting. Students' personalities showed in their personal pages. Steve's page showed the kid of a research physicist. Precise, succinct, I think that's the word, S-U-C-C-I-N-T, I-N-C-T. I'm not good with words sometimes, so that's just ignorance on my part. Precise, succinct, and somewhat lacking in spontaneity. What is it with all these words? I don't know these words. Spontaneity. Yeah, I think that's the word. Something like myself, actually. It wasn't a bad thing, except in reality TV shows where they have to keep the gap going all the time. Jack was a genuinely nice guy, a good talker, and the stereotypical boy from New York City who had plenty of stories to tell. He seemed to be a gentleman. Jack knew I was not the kind of girl who had to put up with foul language or crude jokes, and he carefully avoided them. He was one smooth operator. We were soon seen eating in the cafeteria together, whenever our schedules allowed, and around campus generally. One Sunday, Steve saw me at Mass. He looked embarrassed, like somebody who had missed his chance, not somebody who did something bad. Well, 4 years is a long time, and the campus had a lot of women. It's kind of funny, this chapter's actually not completely embarrassing so far. Steve seemed like a nice person. He always gave me a little smile like he was glad to see me. He and Jack were casual friends and apparently didn't talk about me, but I'd seen the looks. Steve was genuinely interested. I didn't know what I felt about him. We never had a conversation alone. There was nothing wrong with dating Jack for a while. It was already clear that we were not compatible enough for a lifetime of commitment. He was a little careless about schoolwork and had no passion for his major. I was fanatical about mine. but Jack was fun to be around for the time being. I was walking out of a bio. I was walking out of biology less. I was walking out of biology lecture on my way back to the dorm to wait for lunch when I heard an authoritative male voice. Theresa Sullivan? It was a campus cop. Yes? We have a problem. Can you come to our office? I don't know where it is. I'll follow you. A campus wasn't so big that you couldn't reach any central place in 5 minutes. I followed 100 feet behind the cop so people wouldn't notice. We arrived at the campus police office. It was led to a conference room. Nothing but a room with a long table and chairs and a grease board. There were 9 police there. 2 20-something guys who looked like upperclassmen, and a priest in his 60s. The senior cop painted the picture. This is B.C. President Father Walter Haynes, he said. We saw these 2 men following you around the campus. Do you know them? I looked at the 2 men. They were either my watchers or nutcases. If they were watchers, they must not have said anything yet. They'd be ordered not to. But there they were, and the school had to be told something. I thought about all this a moment. Father Haynes interrupted my thoughts. You seem to be a very interesting young lady, Miss Sullivan. The Holy Father himself paid for your scholarship. Did he say why? No, it's a big secret. I spoke to the 2 young guys assuming they were watchers. I've been here a week. It's not so easy following somebody on campus. Hun? Is that supposed to say huh? It's like H-U-N-H. It isn't, said one of them. Or, it isn't, said one. I'm using my voice. Said one of them. Looking for guidance? They were watchers. I said, it's gone too far. They'll go to the FBI and the newspaper. Call your boss. He pulled out a cell phone and whispered to somebody. After a few moments, he said, he's calling the director. Eyebrows went up around the room. The tension... Next page. The tension built as we waited for something to happen on the other end of the phone call. Then the watcher told me, the director is calling the President of the United States. Did I have everybody's attention now? You bet! A few more moments and the watcher handed me the phone to the senior cop. He wants to talk to you. The cop took the phone and was read the riot act. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wait, this is... Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, sir. I understand, sir. I wouldn't want that either, sir. After a minute, the senior cop handed the phone back to my watcher. He told everybody the facts of life. We will say nothing about this to anybody. Not to each other, not to our wives, not to our dogs. This situation does not exist, nor will it ever exist. That's all. I could have walked out in an instant, but hung around a moment for effect. I looked at each person with an air of confidence. I looked like I had the situation well under control, and they'd better listen to the prez. Then I walked out. Come October, it was homecoming week. Always a big weekend on any college campus. There were many special activities going on, and we had to choose a list. Friday nights, the kids would hang, that's in quotations, would hang around, I see, meaning drift up and down the dormitory hall, talking and joking with anybody there. Jack had suggested we go to a movie at 8. I went down to the 2nd floor to hang around until movie time. Jack's door was open and I walked in. There were 6 boys visiting Jack, including Steve Hartley, and 1 girl. I keep reading that as like Steve Harvey, like, welcome back to Family Feud. As soon as I entered, everybody went silent. I knew something was very wrong. I waited as everyone looked embarrassed. The girl stood next to Jack. She looked possessive. Hi there, Theresa, said Jack, with not a lot of enthusiasm. This is Ginny. Hi, I said. There was not much else to say until I found out something. Ginny dropped in by surprise, Jack said. Yeah, I could see that. I couldn't remember seeing her around campus. Or, at least not in our complex. She might be somebody from outside. The embarrassing silence continued. Ginny looked very uncomfortable. She had known no more about me than the other way around. Ginny's position near Jack made it clear she considered herself his girlfriend. "Do you have anything to say, Jack?" I asked. "I'll be up in a few minutes." I went back upstairs. This was all the most humiliating experience I ever had. All those boys were watching. I thought they liked you, though. Like, I didn't understand. I thought they, liked her, though. Never mind. So, two-timing Jack was coming up for a last look, was he? I'd give him something to look at. I went to the closet and pulled out my little black nothing. It was a backless dress made of flimsy, clingy material. It was something appropriate for a party, but not in my room, with no other girls to look at. Jack would find it hard to forget. He deserved the VIP treatment. Oh. Okay, so our nice little innocent advertised girl, as she's been said to be, is wearing a very seductive, risque outfit to get the attention of boys. Okay. 6 inches above the knee wasn't a big deal these days, but to make it more interesting, I folded back the hemline 3 more inches inside the skirt and taped it. Now that was a dress. I hope they're not going anywhere with this. I put it up and looked in the full-length mirror on the door. Yup, this would kill Jack. He'd promised to throw Ginny out the window if I took him back. Sorry, Jack. Too late for that. Sorry, had to do that. I waited a few minutes. There was no knock on the door. I sat on the bed and turned on the television. They were showing the early part of the Caine Mutiny. I'd seen it before. There's so many movie references I won't get. Captain Queeg, I don't know, was a paranoid personality who couldn't take adversity. It made him a dictator on the ship. He made his men miserable with his inflexible demands. Later, there would be an ultimate crisis, a monstrous typhoon that threatened to sink the ship. That's when the captain lost it, and his chief mate, His chief mate, Merrick, took over the ship on the grounds that the captain was nuts. As a reward for his courageous saving of the ship, Merrick was put on trial for mutiny. My dad, who had been in the Navy, read the book and said half of it was about a love story between Ensign Keith and a girl who wanted to be a singer. Eventually, her career took off, and she left the ensign. Dad guessed that this boring love story meant something to the author, but it dragged down the book. Yes, something that's dragging down a book. Whatever. The movie producers wisely dropped the singer's story and concentrated on the mutiny. It worked, because the chief mate's willingness to sacrifice his career to save the crew was a very effective love story of sorts. I noticed something similar in a book called The Robe, which my grandmother gave me. It was written by a Methodist minister who filled it with quotes from the Bible. It was a spectacular best-selling book in World War II, when the world looked like it was falling apart. But it would probably bomb today. In the Hollywood movie starring Richard Burton, all the Bible quotes were dropped, and they concentrated on the conflict between Burton and Caligula? All these names. But Burton and his girl marched off to the martyrdom from a more dramatic Emperor's throne room scene that was in the book. Sometimes subtle messages work better than speeches. Yes, subtle messages can work very well, actually. I don't know. I want to know if this is going anywhere. That's how I operate. Okay, I see. That's where it's going. That's how I operate. I could have criticized Jack in front of his friends for dating me without telling about Ginny. But I said nothing. I let people think out for themselves. The movie ended with the Caine sailing back out to sea. Ensign Keith was the only officer of the original crew left after the devastating trial. The next movie was one of those horrible made-for-TV Walking Dead movies. I couldn't stand them and turned off the TV. The problem with that trash is it didn't address The problem with that trash is it didn't address the individual's decision in life. It was insulting to avoid challenge the viewer's It was insulting to avoid challenging the viewer's ideas, as if his ideas didn't matter. I'm not sure I understand. Like, if I was running away, I'd run away from a bunch of zombies. I mean, that's just called kind of being smart. At least in the Kane Mutiny, you were challenged to think whether you would have the courage to take over the ship like Merrick. If you were a real thinker, you'd consider why the Navy didn't look into the circumstances of the monsoon scene before rushing into putting Merrick on trial. Apparently, nothing had been said before the trial. I stared at my roommate's wall. There was nothing to do, and I was milking my loneliness. People who never went to college believed it was one continuous party. In fact, parties were rare. Some colleges had nearby drinking spots just outside the next page campus where kids crowded it until the fire codes were broken twice over. But BC wasn't like that. It was all residential zone and no commercial. College life was mostly studying and killing time with inane activities. And a lot of dead, as far as I know. I never went to college. It was a test. If you could stand this life for 4 years, you could stand anything. A lot of kids went nuts and dropped out. After half an hour moping on my bed, I moved to my desk and resumed moping. Paging through old magazines was my pretense of doing something. The truth was, I was desperately lonely. I thought of going downstairs to see what was going on, but after the scene in Jack's room, my loneliness would be too obvious. I still had a little pride. It was amazing how quiet I could be on the girls' floor. That was another thing people got wrong. It was now nearly 9 o'clock, and I was near tears. There was nobody around here who cared for me. There wasn't one person I could walk up to and call friend to their face. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," I said. Steve Hartley walked in. Is he the New York guy? Because if so, I know what voice to give him. He walked up close to my desk and said, "Ginny is Jack's hometown girlfriend. They've been seeing each other for years. She was supposed to show up next week, but she came early. So, it was going to be all over anyway." "Did you know about her?" "No, none of us did." "Have a seat." I indicated the bed. Okay, I'm going to say viewer's discretion advised. I do not know where this is going, and I'm going to apologize in advance if it's going where I think it might be going. He sat down I indicated the bed. He sat down on the edge of it. We looked at each other. I must have looked pretty sad after a miserable evening. I sensed that he wasn't aware of how lonely I'd been, but somehow I didn't mind his knowing. "Anything going on in the dorm?" I suggested. "There's an all-night card game." I heard about the boys playing cards all night. You would think something exciting was going on, but all they did was throw cards around. There was no intelligent conversations possible when all you did was look at your cards. Why did they do it? Sorry. Oh no. He glanced at my legs, my hemline. My hemline was practically up to my hits when I sat down. Nothing excited boys more than a shirt skirt. Is that supposed to say short? Bikinis don't do as much. Here we go. "You're quiet, Steve. Something on your mind?" "Yeah. You want me to leave?" "If you leave now, I'll have to kill myself." Oh my... I hope that's sarcastic. "If you leave now, I'll have to kill myself." It'd be nice if it said, she said sarcastically or seriously or whatever. I'm trying to gauge the vibe, you know. That stuff can kind of help. Like, that's just, I guess, some advice. It took a few seconds before Steve got the joke. Okay. It took a few seconds before Steve got the joke and laughed. Was that a joke? The ice was broken, and we each had that little smile of people comfortable in their situation. Next came planning the night's campaign. "Will you stay with me a while, Steve?" "I want to." I smiled. "I think we can find something But I don't know which one of them's talking here. "I think we can find something interesting to talk about." Yeah, probably her. I stood up and reached for a deck of DVDs high on my bookcase. The DVDs were the famous BBC production series, Victoria. You ever watch this, Steve? No. You'll like it, I said, while walking over to put the first disc in the player. An 18-year-old girl becomes Queen of England and Empress of the British Empire. Everybody wants something from her. Next page. She survives 8 assassination attempts. You wonder how a teenage girl got through it. You wonder if you'd have the nerve to take on what she did. Kind of sounds like the reviews on the back of this book, actually. Like, you know, like how she managed to get through all these struggles, as it keeps saying. I indicated that he move over a couple of feet and sit back against the pile of cushions. I sat next to him with my left arm in reach of my desk. This is more interesting than playing cards, don't you think? Yeah, he said with a smile. You'll get used to me soon, Steve. We have to get over this awkward moment. The feelings of an 18-year-old boy in this close encounter weren't hard to guess. Oh boy. Yeah, the feelings of an 18-year-old boy in this close encounter weren't hard to guess. I felt safe. There was no way he was going to try to take advantage of me like some boys who would keep trying to get something that wasn't his right. Anyway, I could throw him out the window. Oh yeah, because Hal and everything. Victoria was made for the English who already knew the story. It was very complicated with rapid changes from one subplot to another. I had to explain the characters and their motivations. Doesn't really sound like a good movie then. Steve seemed interested. There was much to talk about. We both marveled at the responsibility the girl took on. She could have withdrawn in her castle and ignored everything going on in the world. She went out to be seen by the people, despite assassination attempts, and made heavy decisions like sending a band of traitors to Australia instead of letting them being drawn and quartered. Her uncle was next in line if she abducted. He did maneuvers to bring this about. The Girl Queen told him, I have made mistakes and perhaps I will make more, but I'm a better monarch than you could ever be. I wondered if I could do as well as her age. I wondered if I could do as well as her age. As well at her age, oh my goodness. We took breaks during the night to go downstairs and get little snacks out of the food machine. Some people saw us at 2 a.m., which was sure to start rumors. By daylight, we were giggling from fatigue. We went to breakfast. I was still wearing my little black nothing dress, which stood out at breakfast. It was obvious from our demeanors that we'd been up all night. Girls gave us an eye. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. We hadn't done anything we couldn't tell our parents. Nosy girls filled our table and asked what we did all night. Nothing, I said. Sure, Theresa. I'm sorry, this is written with like 10 R's. Sure, Theresa, Steve joked. The video is on YouTube. We suddenly had lots of friends. An attractive couple was invited to everything. Steve and I were perfect for each other. We could spend hours together without talking. Or we could chatter like 8-year-olds when the mood struck us. I fell for him like a 15-year-old girl in her first love, because, really, Steve was my first love. He was too smart to take advantage of me. Ugh. And also, that shouldn't even be crossing your mind. Like, he's such a good boyfriend that he wouldn't, assault me. He also felt he'd found the right mate and didn't want to mess things up. We had differences in interests and opinions, but nothing critical. Taking a hint from some comments of our parents and grandparents, we'd promised not to try to change each other. That's what kills a lot of marriages. Nobody could change a spouse. And if you even wanted to, hadn't the marriage already failed? We promised that Theresa would always be Theresa. Steve would always be Steve. And that's the way it would be forever. Okay. I thought they were gonna, find out something that was going on with, Struthers. Something that with her leaving, there's, a president, upbringing, or doing something about Hal. It was like the situation with Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson we studied in American history class. The two men were both in Washington's cabinet and argued about everything. Washington had a hard time keeping them from killing each other. Jefferson had been a wealthy kid and had an easy time of it. Hamilton spent his youth on a horrible Caribbean island that made Devil's Island look good. It was the last refuge of criminals trying to escape the law. Slaves had a 5-year life expectancy. Human life had no value. So Jefferson trusted human nature and wanted a nation of gentlemen farmers with little government. Hamilton thought men were scum and wanted a strong central government in control. Between Jefferson's Declaration of Independence and Louisiana Purchase, and Hamilton's central bank and other government institutions, these two men built the America we know. So why did they fight each other in the cabinet? They were founding a nation. They should have been friends. Oh my, how naive. Like those two founding fathers, Steve and I had different childhoods. I had Hal to worry about since age 10. I had to consider that someday I would have to take part in world affairs. What would happen if the world found out about Hal? It would be chaos. That's why the government was watching me day and night. My father said I'd be captain of my ship and had to learn all I could about the world. Yeah, well, I might be captain of a lot more than my ship. I took an interest in politics, sociology, and history, though not enough to want a career in any of them. Steve had 2 sisters and a brother, happily married parents, and a good family income. If he had a theme song, it would be "Everything is Beautiful in Its Own Way." He wanted to be a physicist like his father and had no interest in politics. He was Jefferson, who thought people would turn out all right, and I was Hamilton, worried about the worst. But we never argued. We got along beautifully. Steve was years ahead of boys his age. He understood that a girl wants romance, not sex to fulfill some urge. I mean, in college, I think boys should be mature enough, hopefully, but I don't know. I don't think, maybe standards are just low and I just don't know about it. He did nothing ungentlemanly the first time he entered my dorm room, despite my compromising situation. He wanted a lifetime commitment as I did. Despite almost universal skepticism, there really are gentlemen like Steve in the world, and every girl wants to be a lady who catches one. The current Miss Massachusetts was at BC. She went out with a guy with glasses and an extroverted, jolly personality that reminded me of Jeff Winslow, my high school steady. This was not what people would call a man's man, but eat your heart out, guys. He was dating Miss Massachusetts. I found out that the previous year he had been the steady escort of that year's Miss Massachusetts too. He found the secret of dating outstanding women. He treated them like ladies. So it was with Steve. I noticed girls looked at us with envy. They could see we had that eternal love of a Disney full-length animated movie. "Someday my prince will come," sang Snow White. Yeah, well, I had my prince. Perfect girl getting the perfect man. I get you. In a month, we knew we'd get married, and we wanted it soon. Well, really, now. We could go 4 years without doing it? Calm down, Mike. I was gonna say, isn't that a little bit, I don't know. Yeah, could we go 4 years without doing it? Yeah. Mom and Dad raised the parental eyebrows when they learned of our plans following a whirlwind courtship. Fortunately, Father Donatry, whatever, got to know Steve well in our meetings to plan the wedding. Father convinced my parents that Steve was as fine a boy as I was ever likely to meet. And while we were young, he'd found that some young couples were still together 60 years later. There was nothing to indicate our marriage wouldn't work. On the other hand, discouraging it might cause harm. It was a dilemma for my parents. Eventually they approved. It all came down to one question. Did Steve and I know what we were doing? Father Donati had seen many young marriages fail, and knew the reasons. He believed Steve and I would succeed. The large Sullivan clan had waited for years to see this girl's wedding, and they weren't disappointed. I was gorgeous as a recently turned 18-year-old. For the church service, I wore a 2-piece wedding gown. a floor-length wide skirt with spaghetti shoulder straps made from a matte Duchess satin. Spaghetti. Maybe I don't know what a. When I think two-piece, I usually think of like, I don't know. Maybe it's probably not a bikini or something, but spaghetti strap. This is at church, right? Whatever. Where was I? I was losing my track. Duchess satin. Over this, I had a jacket made of peekaboo cotton, Venice lace that more or less covered my shoulders, and the top half of my upper arms so as not to scandalize the congregation. At the reception, the jacket and train came off my shoulders, and cleavage charmed the crowd. You know, I want to iterate right now that I'm sorry for this little break, but Norman Boutin was 64 years old when he was writing this, and I'm gonna be real here. He comes off as like kind of something that maybe like a middle school boy that's like really passionate about wanting to get into writing would do. Like kind of writes out some fantasies, shall I say, that are boiling up in his mind, and you know, making his like kind of ideal waifu, shall I say, that, you know, like once you're like an adult, like you kind of look back and sort of be embarrassed about. But I guess that didn't happen. Instead, he made some revisions to this, or whatever. Cleavage charm the crowd. I'm sorry, that line really had to make me just get myself together. And now we set off to find what life was all about. Henry David Thoreau was a 19th century philosopher who lived not far from Boston. He spent a year in a one-room shack in the woods next to Walden Pond to find himself. Car coming by. He said other men could journey to Africa to shoot giraffes if they wanted, but he preferred to stay home and shoot himself. What he meant was, you should explore your inner self. That's an odd way of saying it. You'll find your own territory greater than the Russian Tsars. CZARS. Men try to prove their courage by going to unexplored jungles, hunting lions with spears, or climbing the tallest mountains, but don't have the courage to examine themselves. Thoreau said that. Not me. Blame him. Anyway, Steve and I would explore ourselves and each other. We hoped to like what we found. We moved into a small apartment for privacy during the summer break. It belonged to a retired couple who spent all the warm months touring the United States in an RV. Something a lot of retirees did. Retirees? I think that's the word, yeah. Something a lot of retirees did, we learned. Steve's father gave us a new Chevrolet as a wedding present. I was driving the car alone one Saturday to go grocery shopping, thinking of the wonderful future waiting for me. Okay. Sadly, I'd actually have to say that, that was probably the best, I guess the most tolerable chapter so far. It was kind of long, I'll say, and, it was, I don't know, it just kind of came across as, like, another fantasy thing. Like, I thought we were gonna, like, go into, like, the mysteries and, like, find out about what's her name, but, yeah, as far as that cleavage comment, I'm sorry, I'm still caught up on that. Like, that adds nothing to the story. Like, I'm getting the feeling that this is just one of those stories that the author writes just to fulfill, like, some sort of fantasy, like I already said, you know, like The Room or The Cell or something like that. But, you know what? While I'm here, actually, I need to close one page of my life. I am going to, right here, look up one thing. How to pronounce Donati. Okay, I looked up the name, and literally the first thing that came up was the Empress Theresa wiki. I just need to get this done, because I think I'm saying this wrong. Donati. No matches for the name, so I guess I'm just gonna have to guess, like I said. But, yeah, that was, chapter 3. I'm already losing track. Fairly, I guess, somewhat lengthy, but, yeah. Have a good one. I'll go to church tomorrow and take a break so that I can, I guess, get my mind off things. Something a bit more pure, shall I say. Have a good one.